and I put on slides step by step what I did. And the goal that I wanted to build is a personal ticketing system. So the problem that probably most of us have is that we get so many emails and messages in a day, and it's just disturbing any workflow. And at some points, we wish we had like a ticketing system where I say, okay, just write me a ticket, and when I have time, I get to it. Or ideally, whenever an AI knows what your answer is, I will do that. I had the situation like the week before last week where I had one day, I forgot which one day it was, where I got like 20 emails which was just let me Google that for you answers, and I got really, really frustrated. So I came up with this example. What I did here is this thing I quickly will touch on managing the prototype. So I first set up a list of user stories, what I as the user would want this thing to do. How we write user stories, we will see in a quick minute. And so I started with a big list. So I decided for one of these user stories, again, this is the same list, but now it's on a Kanban board. And I said, okay, there's one thing in progress, and I want to first create a thing where I, as the owner, receive an email that is auto-labeled with a question, if there's an action required. So let's see how we can do that. Of course, the first thing I think about is, okay, in the terms of this kind of framework, what do I need as an interface? What should the logic be? Where should the data go? As the interface, I decided I want to have email, because people will already write me email. I will not force them to download an app. I will not force them to go to a specific web page. I will not force them to do anything else but continue sending me email. This, of course, is only my spam email folder, so there's nothing in there that is interesting for you, at least I hope. So there are many ways of connecting these emails. If we use the example from yesterday with the mail hook, it would be in the preferences, and in the preferences you can see forwarding. And if you want to do this with Make.com, this is one of the easier ways to use it. So you would put forwarding and forward it to the mail hook you have. So every single email that gets into this email folder or in your inbox is being forwarded to Make.com. There's also another way. I used this with Zapier. I'm now showing you Zapier so you can see that no matter what tool you are using, it's basically the same thing. And you can use, again, everything I show you here, you can do exactly the same thing with Make.com. You can connect your account to Zapier or to Make.com. It's super easy. It's just you log in, you click that you want to connect your personal email account. You can also add several email accounts and just say, okay, when a new email comes in, a new labeled email, so I want to give it a label. So I already basically added the feature that I have to add a label. I probably don't want to get emails from important partners into a ticketing system, but other emails that I just label should go into this ticketing system. Again, when we set this up, there's a little bit more work to do in Make.com. This seems to be generally true. In Zapier, they have built quite a lot built in that takes a lot of the configuration heavy lifting for you. Whereas in Make, you have to spend more time on the configuration. For example, with setting up the Gmail account, it will probably take you like 15 to 20 minutes to get it in. Once you have it in your account, of course, you can use it for every single workflow that you have. The advantage of configuring your own setup, of course, is that you have more control of what data it pulls and what data it doesn't pull. Okay, we've also learned this is a trigger. So this always triggers the action, whatever comes next. And also what you can see in Make, it would go from left to right. In Zapier, it would go from up to down. So we add now a new action. And this action is, of course, Airtable. We're thinking about data. So we also add an Airtable account and click on the event create or update a record, meaning when a new label in email, in Gmail is coming in, then go to Airtable and create or update a new record. So when I click that, so the setup step goes when you click here. We will go into to the real world in a second. It always goes here from left to right. In Make, this would go from up to down there. So it's actually quite easy once you have done it for one time in both systems. And here you select the base. Yesterday we said, okay, everything lives in a base. A base can have several tables. We had yesterday the example of the base of this ERP with the tables of customer data, order data, and product data. So we use the base, we use the table, have a lookup field, so you always need to select a key table. That doesn't really matter, so depending on how specific you want to do, but in most cases it just works putting in something. Going on Airtable, of course, now we need to create this database. And this is a great thing about Airtable as well that I talked about yesterday. Now we are thinking step by step and say, oh shit, we need to put the data somewhere. So we go to Airtable and say, okay, let's just create a new database, call this ticketing system. This is now the base. The table is just table 1. We keep it at default, and we just change the things that we need, that we think are important. So the name of the email, the content of the email, the assignee. Maybe at some point I will have some employees who will do my ticketing. Probably not, but it's a nice touch. And the recipient, so who sent me this mail. And probably with those fields, I'm good to go. I can start. So I go back. Again, the base is the ticketing system. The table that I need to select is table 1. The lookup field, the key field, I just take the name, which was just the first column. And now I say, okay, when I have those fields, what action is happening? Remember yesterday, we first had to specify the keys. Remember the JSON exercise? We had to specify the keys. How are the keys supposed to look? And then what content do we match to the keys? Same thing we do now here in the Airtable. So we have specified the keys, or it has drawn it from Airtable already. And everything we now say is the name. It should put the mail on the mail, the subject of here, for example, it's a Google mail which has Sicherheitswarnung. Somebody logged in your Google account. I actually logged in my Google account, obviously. You know these kinds of emails that you get, but it's just for test purposes. And the content of the email should, of course, be the body from the first step. So we just take this in here. Assignee, we can leave empty. And recipient is the from email. And what we see when we test the ZAP, test the scenario, that it gets filled automatically with the data that we want. Assignee gets auto-filled because I set up in Assignee that when I put nothing in and add a new field, then it should automatically assign this to me. And now we add a second feature and I say, okay, it's cool that now I have it in an email, in an Airtable, but I would love to see if AI can do something for me. For example, summarize the request. You know, sometimes you get super long emails and you just want to say, okay, can you just give me what is interesting to me or what I need to answer? So I add just on the fly a field called AI summary. It's a long text and see what we can work with there. So with the first step that we already have, everything is set up in a way that when an email comes in, it moves it to Airtable. Super simple, we are already done with that part. Now we're adding a second part. For that we're adding a second scenario and say the trigger is now when we have a new field or a new record in Airtable. So this again is the trigger. So this time, new scenario, we trigger it with Airtable and say the event is the new record. Again, with the setup, we go just through our account and do all this stuff. And once we have done this, so set it up, in the base, in the table, limit of view, we do not need that, so everything is fine. And when we have done this, of course, we want to call our good friend ChatGPT and say we want to start a conversation. The naming is exactly the same as in Make.com. We also would ask for a conversation. There are also so many other triggers that you will learn on the fly when to use them, when not to use them. And say we want to have a conversation, set up our account, set up our action. When you want to learn how to write good prompts in your automation, then go again to T12S. We have all the recordings and all the materials from the last AI microclass that we did last month, which focus a lot on writing prompts and writing prompts in a way that you get the output that you want. And here again, this is the magic thing that you need to understand. So the two magic things are probably understanding this logic that you always have a trigger and an action or several actions or routers or something else. And the second part is that every action will ask you, with what kind of data do I want to work? And the kind of data available in every action are data steps available from before steps. So here the user message, we will put in, please give me the content that I put in the database. So remember, with the first step, the content was just the body of the email. We used GPT-4o, because why not? And ask it, probably we ask it here somewhere even more, no. Okay, we'll look in the step in a minute. I would have thought that in this step we ask it summarize this. Maybe I've made a mistake. And then we put this back to Airtable. So as you see, you can add as many steps as you want. Again, downside with the free tier of Zapier, it gives you only two-step scenarios. If you want to build this is already in the paid tier, which is a little bit frustrating, or can be a little bit frustrating. And here we say, please update the record now in Airtable. So we go back to the connector of Airtable. Like in every system, the first thing you do is you select which endpoint do I want to go to. In this case, I want to go, I'm not thinking I want to write it back, but you're thinking I want to go back to Airtable. And when I'm back to Airtable, I want to update a record in Airtable. I want to update the ticketing system, the table 1, and the record ID. The record ID for the step number 3 should of course be the record ID from step number 1, meaning I want to update the same record that I draw it from, that I manipulated here, that I want to put back. And the thing that I want to do is I want to not update any of the fields. So these are again the fields from the table. I only want to update the field I called AI response. And once I did that, you can see it ran. It's in the record that we set up, and it just writes this here. So the AI response would be probably not too helpful in this case, but this is all AI generated. And if I took more time and set it up more properly, I probably could get to a stage where I can say, okay, easy questions, now I can answer them with email, with AI automatically. So the next step, of course, would be that either I put a human in the loop or I trust the system and write a third thing that says, whenever I have an AI response, then send an email out to this email address that is hidden now behind this field of the recipient, and just send it back and say, okay, this ticket is now solved. So in my management system, I can now say, okay, the in progress can be done. I say that this solved it. And two things about building like that. Again, I know this is a little bit confusing in the beginning. But this is also super addictive once you get into it, and you will just add new features and say, oh, it would be cool to put this in and to put that in, and to make so many more features. So try if you ever get to the point, try to stop you a little bit on that. So I'll show you now the real world thing, if I find my mouse, how I build it, and I would want you to ask any questions if you still have questions, or if this is not plastic enough, or you still think there is something to discuss. I'm still setting up here, so everything is fine. So let's look into it. Again, it looks very similar to make once you get your head around that it's 90 degrees flipped. So we have here the setup, the trigger. I'm sorry, I need to talk to the back. Yes, there's a question. Why did you use two automations for this and not just one? What am I using? Why did you use two automations for this and not just one? Everything in one? Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Why did I use two automations? Why did I not put everything in here? I, of course, could have. And in this size, it doesn't make too much of a difference. I prefer to have every automation basically from a data point to a data point. So if I want to change something here, for example, I want to filter something here, then everything that comes after that, maybe I want to filter and say only let those in, then I'm more free on adjusting the services by themselves, or I want to say, okay, also add, this is probably the better example. Let's take this from, so the reasoning is keep them separated so you can adjust the single steps of processing as you want and are not too dependent on the entire system. For example, I have this now with my private email account, but I also could say, okay, I have more than one Gmail account, or I have a Gmail and something else, so I would need to have a second automation to also write into this Airtable database. And in this way, I can say I'm not dependent on putting it in through this email or through Slack or through anything else. It comes into the Airtable, and the second automation that I do, I just do it on the Airtable data, and as far as I can manage to keep the data somewhat uncorrupted and to keep the data clean, I can do whatever I want on it. I will show you another example where it maybe makes a little bit more sense, but there's no harm in making those huge scenarios. I just personally think they are not as good to maintain and very hard to move to different subsystems. In particular, for example, we want to change a service. Okay. Well, as you can see here, we basically can use thousands. They claim 7,000. I think Make claims 3,000. In the end, you will use 100, 200 in real life, so it doesn't really matter. Put this here. Set this account is always something that you have in both of the systems. And as you can see here, maybe I want to move this from my private to my company or to the Eisbrunnen one, and I can just do that. And then I set the trigger up here, and I say, okay, please only go to the mailbox important. I could go to every mailbox. I could make that custom. It doesn't really matter. And the important thing is that it gives me some example data, and it already shows me how the example data does it. This would be the same thing when you have in Make, right-click, say, run only the step, and it pulls you already one email, and this email would be this, Make wurde Zugriff auf Ihr Google-Konto gewährt, and this is basically the payload we're now working with. And then the second step, we go through this and say, here again, we have a lot of possibilities where we can do the setup. Of course, when you do your first automations, you don't know which one is the right one. it's mostly trial and error. Use one that works for you. If you take the wrong one, it will give you an error message. Working with error messages, you know, is very frustrating, but it's part of the experience. I, for example, already know that when I use Zapier, when I want to create a new data record, I have to make create or update record and not create record. Why is that? I just tried to use both, and this one was the one that works better. And here I have the entire system. So the ticketing system, I go to the ticketing system. As you can see, it sees all my databases. I could use all the 8 databases, but of course I built the ticketing system for that. I use only the table number 1. I use the lookup field name. As you can see, I could have looked up for every other, but I just need to select one lookup field. In this scenario, it's totally unimportant which field I look up to. And the data, once I specified these, it gives me the data structure already. So these are the fields it directly drew from the account. I can show you if I, for example, go to something else, which is not too critical. Let's say test base. I don't know what is in there, but probably something not as critical. There's also a table 1. I have a lookup field, which I take, for example, nodes. Then it would directly change the data structure, and you can see now it's completely different data structure because it now talks to a different database and is in a different database. So it asks me, okay, this data from the first step, where would this go into this new database? And you have also seen in Make.com, the bold ones are the one that you have to fill out. In Zapier, it's the one with the asterisk that you have to fill out. The rest you can leave empty whenever you want or do not want it. This is the one thing that I wanted to show you here. The other thing, maybe that's a little bit more, shows a little bit more about the why it can be a little bit messy if you make it very big, could be the matchmaking. Okay, that's apparently not how I search. Here we go. So in this scenario, again, it's just up to down. It could also be left to right. Quite a lot of things happen. Here again, I start with the data in Airtable. And why do I do this? Because there are different ways how the data came in. This is also one reason why here I separated this, because I changed the incoming data from not Webflow, from, what is it called? To Tally, web form, flow form. This one form builder to another form builder. So I don't care about this because here I'm working with the Airtable data. So it can come in from every side. You can write me an email. If I build an email connector to Airtable with the same data structure, this works perfectly. And then you can see I have quite some scenario path. Again, how are they called in Make.com? It's called routers. And I just route through different fields and do different stuff. You can see I have several AI things. I would probably do that differently in Make.com. Zapier runs per step, so it charges per step. Make charges per operation, so I probably in Make I try to combine those 1, 2, 3, 4 AI operations in one operation, so I save on operations. And then I just send it out to everybody. The better way to do this actually would be to stop at step number 12. Between step number 1 and step number 12, I do a lot of data manipulation and I do a lot of data enrichment. So what this Airtable step here, for example, does, I add, no, I don't want to go through that. But I add an AI-adjusted idea to the database, to the table. And the better thing, of course, would be to stop here. So I have basically the first step, which is getting data into the table. The second step is improving the data quality on the table. And the third step would be distributing the data to, as you can see here, quite a number of Discords and Slack channels and email channels and that stuff. Oh, there's a question. I'm sorry.
This looks quite cool. Can you give us an example and how it flows through?
Of course.
On a specific example, so that I can understand how to.
Of course I can. Of course I can. So, I have less flow control. This is why I can't do an actual flow through this. But what happens is, let's go to this. Let's go to that. Let's go here. And no, let's go here. No, let's go here. And go here. And just look through these one, because these are the ones that are already publicly shared. So let's say we have an idea that's coming in here. This is everything you see here is coming from a field that the co-founder put in. So the co-founder puts it in through the form. In the form basically is connected. The tally form is connected. I can also show you that. The tally form, which is living here on this tally website, doesn't really matter, co-founder search, you can see here it has an integration and it automatically writes its results to Airtable. So this step is completely automated already, so it comes here. Then we have two types of spam prevention. We have seen that some people wrote insanely short things like, I'm building a new fitness company. This is nothing that I can send around, because I have no idea what this even means. So the first static spam prevention just looks, does it have enough characters? The description, tell us about your idea. This is the idea. And is it long enough so I can work with that? If it passes that, so if I say, okay, this step is basically, so this is also something you have to learn by using the system. You cannot ask directly, has it more than 250 characters, but you have to do it in two steps. This first step takes the string and counts the number of characters. So the output of the number 2 is 300, as in 300 characters. This idea has 300 characters. And then I filter if the idea is more than 250 characters. In this case, it's 2,200 and whatnot. Then I let the AI check if this is actually a valid idea, if this is some bullshit or if this is something repeated. This AI is really, really strict. If I have some time, I need to redo it a little bit, because it also rejects some very good ideas. So I need to redo that. Again, this is a little bit prompt engineering. This is a little bit of the trial and error. But basically, the thing that I'm saying is, take the message, take this as an assistant instruction. Again, the difference between assistant and user, you can see in the slides from the previous microclass. Your job is it to find spam. And if there's a spam, then just put out the word spam. If you think it's not spam, then put no spam. Why am I doing this filtering step before? Because of course I'm calling the OpenAI API. So every time I call this, it costs me money. So the obviously too short things I want to already filter out here. And then when it goes through, this check step is already through here. Then some things happen that are not too interesting for us on the left, on the right. The interesting thing that happens here is the next AI step. So this entire path thing, the 5, the 10, the 35, and the one over here is basically just one single step. Zapier makes it look very complicated and big. Makes it look very easy and very easy to use. But this is again another thing where you just have to learn your system. Number 11, now I found that it sometimes makes sense to add another thing where I tell the assistant in number 11, now we are number 11, you're an editor who tries to improve on the idea. So I often see two problems. Once you're a business person and describe your idea and looking for a techie, and you just describe the business prowess for that. But techies are not interested in how big the market is. Techies are interested in the technical problem that you try to solve. So the editor should help the business people who are looking for a technical co-founder to write it a little bit more interesting for technical co-founders. And the techies, of course, have the opposite problem. They write, I'm solving a great technical problem, but are not too much interested in which market does it serve. So on the other hand, this same step is also trying to help the techies to make it better for the business, for the techies to say, okay, this is now interesting for business guys as well. And once we have that, we update the Airtable. So you can see the new, we're pulling the record, again, we're pulling the same record that we pulled in step number 1, because after step number 1, of course, we closed the database, so we have to reopen it now. It's basically the same when you try to work with Excel sheets or databases in Python. After every time you call the database, you close the database again, so you have to reopen it. This is what we do in step number 12. And say, okay, now in the field called AI adjusted ideas. So this is how the field is called in the Airtable. And I can show you in the Airtable AI adjusted idea. Write, please, this kind of content. And here another reason why I probably should keep that separated, because one very popular request is that before, at the moment, as you can see, everything runs automated. So if you send an idea, the AI adjusts it and writes it out without your consent. So I just assume that whatever the AI comes up with is better than what you come up with, which sometimes is not the case. So a very often requested feature is that in between sending all these messages out, I would like to ask you again, is this okay if we rewrite it like this and only then write it out, which of course would be another workflow. Okay, so we're now in number 12. In number 13, some magic happens. In Zapier, the orange colored things are internal tools. In Make.com, they are a little bit more colorful, but you have the same tools. And the thing I'm doing here now is from all the data I have, I create a message. So I create a message that I want to send out, which says, new co-founding opportunity. The first name from the database is looking for what he is looking for about the idea of the number of the name that person gave the company, the summary in one line, and the AI reply that we got from this. If you're interested in solving person first name, then who wants to found in location, then do all of that. So this is maybe something that you were not aware of, but all the things that also Jana was moving around yesterday, in all those fields you can of course use variables, which are denoted with the app symbol that you have. Or you can also hard code, of course. If you say always put in the number 2 and push the number 2 to something, you can of course hard code your variables there as well. But this step just says, okay, now put it exactly like this, so it gives me a message, and this message is stored in an internal data store. This is, I think, one of 2 instances where I use internal data stores. And this is one here. Why am I putting this in an internal data store? Because you can't move it around just like that. You have to create somewhere as a variable. And then the next thing that happened in this kind of path, again, this Zapier makes this look a little bit complicated, but it's basically just a router that moves it to several fields. And then I'm saying, depending on who you're looking for, send it to different people, like the Unternehmertum, jobs, opportunities, Slack channel. Let's look at one Slack channel very quickly just to see how this works. So we have a channel. We put the message in with a source and a source UTM. And I sent this with some parameters. I had no idea what either of those parameters meant, so I just tried and error until something came out more or less in the way that I would say is okay. And with that, basically everything is done. So from the setup where you say I have an idea to all the way through. It's probably something like 10 minutes of execution time of calling all of this, and then you're good to go. Then the automation works. Yes?
Is the automation now working all the time in the background, or do you have to restart it?
Fantastic question. Is it basically always computing, always running? This is what Jana said yesterday. There are two kinds of how you can trigger. So this is an instant trigger. So it basically always, it just waits for a new record to be generated. So no computing is happening there. It's not like listening in, but the trigger is actually happening on the API side, on the side of Airtable. So whenever Airtable has a new record, it basically shouts, here, a new record, whoever is interested in that. And Make.com listens to this. If you put Make.com to it, Zapier listens to it, Pipedream listens to it, and your custom service that you build on your own server is also listening to it. So whenever that happens, it triggers that. So this API post would basically, the post on the Airtable side would trigger the entire computing here. The same is true for the wait for a new email to happen. Google just says, oh, new email. And the entire system would trigger. There's also a second kind of trigger where you just say, okay, for every 15 minutes, just run a web crawler, or every hour just run a web crawler. So depending on your use case, you can set this up, but it's not consuming compute permanently, and neither in Make nor in Zapier would that be any of your concern, because you're just running the operations, and if they have a system that is always online, that's not your problem. Further questions? Yes?
Just out of interest, like, did you test different LLM models, or are you just going straight?
Also interesting question. Did I test different models? No, I did not test different models. I just went with the most recent. Also, GPT-4o, of course, is the most recent and really, really not very cheap. So I think that's a good balance. Another question?
Why did you use the Zapier for automation?
The question was, why did I use Zapier and not Make? This is, again, the reason why you don't need to benchmark everything. I just got started with Zapier earlier, so I used that. By now, I learned that you have some limitations in Zapier that Make doesn't have. On the other hand, it's a little bit easier to use, but honestly, doesn't make too much of a difference. The kind why I'm keeping with Zapier for this, for example, is because I've got a professional account that the company pays for. If I had to run this on my own budget, I would definitely create this on Make, because this is just a little pricey on Zapier.
Basti, I have it ready if we have a minute and they want to see it in Make.
Sure, that would be amazing.
We have then a second, I can show the site actually running in.
That would be amazing. Another question?
Just one more question, like, did you see any limitations in terms of API availability? So, like, is everybody, like, fine, or are APIs, like, basically everywhere, and every tool can use, like, Slack or whatever? Or
Yeah.
do you see limitations where you say, okay,
Yeah.
this is usually a barrier?
Very fantastic question. Is there a limitation on the APIs that you can use? Yes and no. By numbers, Zapier has more API connections than Make. However, the popular ones, Slack, Google, you name it, OneDrive, both have them. If you have something that's a little bit more specific, just go on their websites. They can show you who has what, and also it's not a 100% login to the one on the other. For example, Zapier recently released a feature where you can run custom code in a working step, which is cool. Make at the moment doesn't have that. Does that mean that you need to put all your workflows onto Zapier? Of course not. You can also connect Zapier and Make. So if you say, okay, you need something the best of both worlds, go with that, connect both of them. I think they even have native integrations, so you don't even need to go through webhooks, and then you can have both. The second thing, despite Zapier having more programs integrated, usually the depth of the integration is deeper in make.com, so you can use more of the API functionalities in Make. Was there another question? If not, then Jana was so cool to have the first use case that we showed, that I showed you in Zapier now, also in Make. So you can see the same thing now in two systems.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mill. Okay, I just plug it in.
So, actually the same scenario with some small details because I didn't know all the details from the use case that Basti has shown you. But how does it look in Make? I also built a series of scenarios. The first one, which I actually use for my own mailbox, which looks like this. I don't use AI, I use filters. And I say whenever there is a new email that contains invitation accepted, invitation rejected, internal emails, so I know already what comes to my mailbox, what are the general rules, so I use it as filters and say if it contains this as a subject of email, if it comes from this domain, put it into a specific folder or label in my mailbox. So that's what Basti did with ChatGPT. I use it on a daily basis for my own email based on the filter.
And just to make a quick comparison, so this router is exactly the same thing that, that's only working on my computer. The routers is the exact same thing that you saw in Path. So I think that the one on Make is a little bit more intuitive how it looks. But yeah, it's very easy and the same thing where you can filter.
So then I get the email that, into, for example, social networks. So in my mailbox, I get all the things that are spam into one folder. I can check it if there is something important, once a week maybe, just to make sure. But in general, the first step is in my case done through Make and through filters. Then I set up my first scenario, which consists only also two steps, which says check that specific folder, so where we got all the replies in your case, and send it to Airtable. In Airtable, I have exactly the same table as Basti had. So here I have actually the name, who sent it, contact, the email, assignee, who is the sender, and I put there AI summary, which you will see in the next step, and also AI response draft. So I will go back to my scenarios. So that was the second scenario. First, that labeled the emails. Second, that sent the data from the email to my Airtable. And a third scenario, which is slightly more complicated, which actually watches the records in my Airtable. It goes through the original text of the email. I ask AI to do actually two steps. I said it, use the content of the email, draft a short summary, and draft an answer. The summary is a simple text, the answer is in HTML. And export all this as a JSON file so that I can process it further and distinguish between the summary and the answer. Then I part it in JSON, which is what we did yesterday, because I want to now get this information into an array, into this specific individual field that I can then map to my next module. And the last module is Airtable, where I already put the AI suggested answer into one field, nicely formatted in HTML so that I can take it and paste it into my email, modify the content maybe and send it and it's nicely formatted. And the other is just take the summary, put it in my table. And since we have also some integrations already in the tools that we use, so we don't need to invent the wheel, right? So as Sebasti showed that you have in Tele, you have integration, so from Tele it goes directly to your email or to your Airtable. So the same we can do when we speak about ticketing system. Here I have the assignee. So the assignee is filled in with their email address. So automatically when the assignee is filled in the table, that person is notified. So you use Make to integrate what you cannot integrate directly, but of course you don't invent wheel. You take native integrations in Tele, in Airtable, and so on.
Very cool. So 2 times the same integration with 2 different systems. Yours is a little bit more advanced, which is cool. Any questions to, yeah?
Why do you use the JSON files in this case?
In this case, I get the answer. I ask ChatGPT to give me any outcome, any result. But if it processes it, I actually get only text the same as you get it in ChatGPT. So it's checked. When you want to process information, data in Make, you need to have them structured in JSON format, because thus you can really pick individual key with the value of a specific key to put it further. So if I leave it as it is, I can take the text and copy it into, for example, Google Sheets as a text, and I will read it and work with that further. But if I parse it as a JSON file, I already give it the structure of data that I need in Make, so I actually save again some extra work for me to go through and deal with it as a text. I give it the structure, so I say, I don't need the full text, I need only this, I need only this. So that's why I can actually, from one prompt actually, I can get 2 results, one the AI draft, the summary draft, and one the answer draft. So
Can you show the JSON step maybe?
The JSON step is actually very easy.
Okay.
No, I will go one
So
step back.
what you say that you should put this JSON step after every OpenAI call?
Just let's go back to the AI. So here I gave it actually 2 tasks, right? The first one, well, there's answer and short summary. And I tell it, give me a JSON file as a result, and I gave it an example. The example says, so there will be actually an array containing 2 individual pieces of information that later on I can deal with individually. One will be summary, and there will be the summary. The second will be called answer, the key will be answer, and there will be the answer. And as a result, I actually get an array, so it's like a little list with different properties. One property will be summary, one property will be answer.
So when I get this right, you're just doing in one step what I showed in the 3 steps. So you need the JSON to get it again from this one step in the 3 or 2 different answers that you want.
I just connect the parse JSON module to ChatGPT, and I filled in the JSON string is the outcome of what ChatGPT gave me. And I can run it once so that we can see what happens actually. Because then we can look into the data inside. So I got only 2 results. So if I go to ChatGPT, I have 2 operations. Is it readable? It's too small, right? So I got the result, and in the choices, in the message, I got the content, and the content says summary is this, and answer is this. It's perfectly fine, I got what I wanted, but with this as it is, I can't really work further in Make. It would still be like little piece of text that I can paste somewhere, but I can't do much more. But if I go to parse JSON, so I also got 2 operations. So here you see the difference. The input is JSON string. It's just a code. But the output, you see, this is summary and this is the content. This is the other item answer and this is the content. And now I have these two items that I can deal with separately in the next module. And this is what I pasted then to my Airtable, saying, in one field, put there only the summary, in the other field, put there the answer. Did I answer your question?
There was another question first.
Can we change the prompt from ChatGPT so we can skip the JSON processing part in theory? So we can just tell it, just give me the message and you can skip using more steps?
If I skip the JSON, the hard JSON, what will happen? You will have that outcome of ChatGPT that you cannot separate. So you will have one text and you will be able to fill, for example, just one field, but then you will manually have to figure out what's the summary, what the Java is.
We use a router and we have two different paths, so one for summary, one for message, and we connect it directly to it.
If you would like to do this, use a router, you would have to use twice the ChatGPT module. In one branch, it would analyze it and create the outcome as a summary. In the other branch, it would create the summary and the answer.
However, you could put two ChatGPTs right behind
And
each
you
other.
can put them, yeah.
You could put them behind each other and just
Exactly.
work with the output of the first and work with the output of the second.
Exactly. So you can still keep it linear, as Basti says. So you could put here in between another ChatGPT module that will give you the other result, and then later on, exactly as you said,
And then you would,
from the first module and from the second module the result.
and then you would not need the JSON thing, but it would cost probably an operation or two more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this little scenario, it wouldn't make much difference as for the cost of
Yeah.
operations. Of course, depending on the scenario, sometimes you just think what's more efficient.
Now, it feels like a really cool test, but I'm wondering, like, actually, how happy are you with the results? Like, does it really save your time?
It depends. It depends. If you have one email per month, it does not save time. You probably at the beginning spend more time automating that. But if you're in a real ticketing office, customer care, or I don't know where, and you receive thousands and thousands of email every day, it saves time. So for example, here the last automation, and I will go to my mailbox because I certainly received it. Yeah. No, I didn't put it there. Well, this is one when I tested it yesterday evening. So just the automation in my Airtable when there's a new raw edit. So the person who's assigned will receive this, a little summary of what's in the email, 3 bullet points, and the direct link to that specific field in Airtable. This will already save a lot of work if you have a bigger team. Instead of people checking their Airtable regular or the database if there are new tasks for them. This is not only that they know there's a new task for them, but they already have an idea how important it is, what that about, if it's something they need to deal with urgently, or it can wait because they got this little 3 bullet point summary, for example, of what's going on. So again, there is no black and white, and always you have to judge the situation you're in, and if the automation takes more time than the solution itself, and the other way around.
Yeah.
A little bit unrelated, but suppose in Bastian's case, he had trained some GPTs on his own and integrated those in the workflow. Can we do the same in main?
You can definitely do the same, yeah.
So you can even, and this is a rather new feature, but you can specify the assistant on the OpenAI API side and call the assistants in both systems. So you have a central place to manage the assistants and then you use them wherever. This is also very cool. More questions? Did this help to understand? Yeah, some people not. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. All right, let's try to get this back the way it was.